But if you somehow prove, or if you are given that lines are parallel, then you know these four things happen with those special angle classifications that we've learned today. And you're going to be using tonight on your homework, you're going to use these theorems to help you solve for different variables and solve for missing angle measurements and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is four different theorems. This is four complete, different, separate, if-then statements. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this. But I'm going to keep one up here. Let's say, I don't know, I like alternate exterior angles. So if we start off knowing that lines are parallel, then we know those four things, one of them being that alternate exterior angles are congruent. That's what you're going to be using on your homework this evening. So let's just open up to page 78. We're going to focus on 15 through 20. We're going to focus on those questions right now. We're going to be using those four theorems to help us answer these questions. So the instructions for 15 through 20. It says, in the diagram, line A is parallel to line B. Terrible notation. They should have written the word line out before the lowercase cursive letters. It should say line A parallel to line B. But anyways, they're telling us that that is true. So please mark your diagram that conveys that. Mark your diagram in your book that clearly shows those lines are parallel. Put in the correct notation. It says determine whether each statement in items 15 through 18 is true or false. Justify your response with an appropriate postulate or theorem. They're referring to those four theorems we just got done learning. That if lines are parallel, then we know corresponding angles are congruent, alternate interior angles are congruent, alternate exterior angles are congruent, and same side interior angles are supplementary. So we know all that's true right now because we are told that these lines are parallel. So number 15. Angle 2 is supplementary to angle 3. Is that true or false in this diagram? What type of angles are angle 2 and angle 3?
Same side interior.
Those guys are same side interior. When lines are parallel, what happens to same side interior angles?
They're supplementary.
Supplementary. So is that a true statement?
Yes.
Yes, it is. You also need to write that theorem out. So you would say, yes, true, and then write that theorem out. So for number 15, you would write, if lines parallel. Now, when you're writing the theorem, you're very general about it. You don't say specifically line when or if line A is parallel to line B. You're not using specifics. Like this is just, hey, if you've got parallel lines, then any and all same side interior angles are supplementary. So don't use angle 2 or angle 3 in your theorem. You're just writing the theorem. And the theorem states that if lines are parallel, comma, then same side interior angles are supplementary. You need the theorem for each one, because you were justifying your decision about true or false. Now, this is 7-1. 7-1, meaning lesson 1 from activity 7, is all about us learning the new 4 classifications and then understanding what happens when lines are parallel. So you should be able to identify those new 4 types of angles. Also, not forgetting about linear pair and vertical angles. Those are always there. They're always hold their definitions and their properties. But so other than being able to classify them and identify those, you also need to be able to solve equations and determine the validity of statements based off of those 4 new theorems. And again, those 4 theorems are in the if-then format. They're conditional statements. Activity 7, Part 2, Lesson 2. We now look at the converse. We now look at the converse of these statements, because every single conditional statement, every single if-then statement has converse, inverse, and contrapositive, correct? Well, in mathematics, we have theorems, and so this theorem states that if we start off knowing that lines are parallel, then the same side angles are supplementary. Can someone raise your hand and tell me the converse of this statement? Yes, ma'am. So if you look at the converse, this is a whole new ballgame. Completely different. Now, if we know something or if we can prove something about the angles, then we can conclude, because this is the conclusion of the if-then statement, then we can conclude that lines are parallel. So lesson 2 of activity 7 is about proving and showing if lines are parallel or not. So if you can somehow show that corresponding angles are congruent, then you know the lines are parallel when you originally didn't know them. If you can somehow prove that alternate interior angles are congruent, then you can conclude that those lines are parallel. Or if you can show that alternate interior angles are congruent, or if you can show that same side interior angles are supplementary. So part 1 is the original theorems that we talked about, we used today. Part 2, which you are able to do that homework, I did not assign it. But if you know you got a busy weekend ahead of you, you can get ahead this week. Because we're going to talk about the second lesson, and it's just the converse of these statements. Rather than being told that the lines are parallel and then solving problems about the angles, it's just going to be the reverse, converse of that. We're going to be told stuff about the angles, and we're going to have to determine whether or not the lines are parallel or not. So again, I've only assigned activity 7-1 homework. And the quiz next class is only going to be over lesson 1. That's identifying the 4 types of angles, including linear pair and vertical angles, and then solving algebraic equations based off of the original theorems, based off of you knowing the lines are parallel, and then you're making conclusions about the angle measurements. That's all that your quiz will cover. But if you know you got yourself a busy schedule, you can plan ahead and get some of that 7-2 homework knocked out as well. Same thing with 7-3, because there's 3 parts to it. But all of Activity 7's notes, all of Activity 7's notes are on this sheet of paper. Sorry. All of it. Because if you look, so if you look at that back, I've written out for you all 4 converses. I've typed out all 4 converses. And then below that is actually 7-3. So you are capable of doing all of Activity 7's homework. You're not going to turn it in next class, but you are capable of doing that. So if you got a long weekend, busy weekend, you get ahead now, and you can do that. But next class we'll take a quiz over lesson 1 of Activity 7. Are there any questions about notes? Or, all right, one of you all packed up, put your calculators away, and you are free to go.